From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Thank you for joining the McLaughlin Group, a show where friends disagree agreeably. I'm Tom Rogan. This week, we'll dive into Bernie Sanders' momentum, coronavirus chaos, the state of the economy, and more. Our panelists today are author and columnist Pat Buchanan, Eleanor Clift of the Daily Beast, Clarence Page of the Chicago Tribune, and Republican strategist Ryan Gadusky. Okay, let's get to issue 1. Sanders rises.
We are going to unite together and defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country.
The Democratic presidential primary contest advanced this week with a Bernie Sanders victory in New Hampshire. Narrowly beating Mayor Pete Buttigieg, the senator from Vermont now looks to the February 22nd Nevada caucuses. But while Sanders is celebrating, Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden are collapsing. Once regarded as frontrunners, Warren and Biden could only scrounge respective 4th and 5th place New Hampshire showings.
Pat, big question, is Bernie Sanders going to win the nomination?
Bernie is the front runner now, and he's got 2 viable opponents. Warren and Biden, I don't think can win. They're no longer viable, but they're going to stay in. And you got Mayor Pete, and you got who's the other?
Elizabeth.
No, not
Amy.
Elizabeth.
Amy
Klobuchar, who did well, came in with 20%. But the thing about Bernie's got going for him is he's got 4 or 5 opponents going against him in Nevada and South Carolina who are splitting up the non-socialist, non-Bernie vote. And Bernie could win Nevada, could win South Carolina, in which case I think it comes down to then a question of Bernie going against Bloomberg for the nomination. That's where we're at.
Okay.
The key thing is that Biden is not only gone, as we suggested he would be, he is now an ally of Bernie because he and Warren are taking votes that can't go to anyone else who is viable.
Okay, Eleanor.
Okay, well, I wouldn't write Biden off just yet, but it will be a very dramatic story if he does make a comeback. He has staggered into Nevada and South Carolina. And I would say the same about Elizabeth Warren. The fact that she came in 4th in a state neighboring Massachusetts really questions whether the progressive wing of the party has coalesced behind Sanders,
right.
Unlike, as Pat points out, the centrists that are all divided. In fact, Bernie is the Trump of the Democratic Party. He's a consensus candidate. I don't think he got the lowest vote total in New Hampshire of any winner. And he's the revolution he's been talking about hasn't materialized. And so now you have a specter of Mike Bloomberg hovering over everything else, moving up in the polls, spending lots of money. But he's going to get a lot of vetting. But you can see voters beginning to grapple with the fact that he might be the one. Democrats want to defeat Donald Trump, and he's the real billionaire. So this is a wild ride, a fascinating time, and I just got to trust the voters to do I don't know what.
Ryan.
Yeah, last time I was on the show, I said that Bernie was probably the actual leader, not Biden.
You did say that.
I did say that. And I think, though, that I was surprised by how poor Bernie did in both Iowa and New Hampshire. Youth turnout was 18% in 2016, those under 25. It was 11% this time. The boomers came out in full force, and the election was the biggest turnout in the Democratic primary in history. But that was because older voters showed up, not younger voters. I'm kind of doubting maybe if Bernie has what it takes, and every day that Warren stays in this race is a day that hurts Bernie Sanders. That being said, it is looking closer and closer like there's a brokered convention coming up because they don't have a single winner take all states, and in a situation where you have 3 or more candidates going throughout the entire election, which is going to be the case, they're all staying in, you're going to split the vote up enough where you'll have a brokered convention, and they'll definitely deny Bernie Sanders the nomination, even if he has the
So you're sort of agreeing with Eleanor here. It might be Mike coming in.
He can maybe buy it, but it's going to be really bad if he tries to buy the nomination from the Democratic Party.
Okay. Ryan, you know how to bring a smile to my face. Just say the words brokered convention. You know, every journalist wants to. I think the closest we came was maybe 64 or 68 or something. I mean, actual news happens at a brokered convention. I wouldn't say that's happening yet, but you know, we are coming close to it though, because there really isn't a consensus candidate on the Democratic side. Nobody who's brought that party together, crossing the factions. it's more factionalized than I can recall since maybe the McGovern days. That's going to require a good unifier to bring it together. Barack Obama's gone. We've got, and Bernie has a sales job to do internally, and I've seen Bernie supporters doing it to me and others. He's not really that radical, but he still wants to do away with private insurance companies. Yeah, and that alone has caused problems for him out in Nevada now with the culinary union.
Democrats are really worried about the down ballot impact. If Sanders is the nominee, those 9 Republican seats that are somewhat competitive in states where socialism is probably not that popular. And Democrats have an opportunity here if the turnout is big and if they do well, not only to retain the House, but to take the Senate. With Sanders at the top of the ticket, that's dubious, because as Ryan's pointing out, the revolution has not happened.
Right.
The turnout didn't happen.
Okay.
Now there's more tests ahead. He's the favorite in Nevada, which is the next contest.
Look, I think you're going to come down to the Bolshevik versus the billionaire.
Not the Menshevik.
No, the Bolshevik, and it's Bernie, and I'll tell you why. I don't know once you get past South Carolina. Klobuchar ran good in New Hampshire. He didn't have the money to go on to these Super Tuesday states, and I don't think Mayor Pete has got it to go on. And what you get is a number of people out there getting less than 15%, as Bernie, I think, and Bloomberg split that vote. And the closer, again, you get to the convention, say Bernie's got 45% of the delegates, he's not going to walk in there and have it all broken up. He's going to look for somebody to get together with him on a ticket. Yeah, so I'm not sure you're going to, I don't know that you've ever, once you've gotten to the convention, it's not decided on the first ballot.
When it comes to Super Tuesday, you have 3 kinds of contests: the Deep South, the big states, Texas and California, and then the Northeast and Upper Midwest. So you'll have Klobuchar, Buttigieg campaigning in those smaller states, those smaller, whiter states. You'll have Bernie and Biden in the Deep South, and then you'll have everyone try to get some kind of delegate in California because it's by congressional district, not statewide. That being said, Bernie can compete everywhere. Biden can compete everywhere. So can Bloomberg. The only hope that Klobuchar and Warren and everyone else have at these smaller states like Massachusetts, Minnesota, and other places.
We've had 2 tests in virtually all white states. Let's see what happens in Nevada and South Carolina. The African American population has not yet spoken. Biden was counting on them. I'm not sure he can, but you've got Tom Steyer also spending a lot of money in South Carolina to try to. I mean, the thing is, Biden started this out as the Democrat who it was his race to lose, and boy, he's been losing it. But everybody's gone after him. Buttigieg took his health care plan. Amy Klobuchar says, "I'm the one with empathy." That was Joe Biden's, and now. And Steyer and Bloomberg have the money.
Right. So here's the thing: what Bloomberg has gone for him all of a sudden, not even just a few days after New Hampshire. Donald is attacking Bloomberg every day. Right. He's on television. It looks like a Bloomberg-Trump race already.
Yeah,
because of what Trump is doing.
I think if Bernie sweeps Super Tuesday, California, Texas, because his support with black supporters is very, very large. It's considerable. It wasn't what it was in 2016. You're going to see pressure on Barack Obama to sit there and endorse in this race and start campaigning against him, because the boomer vote was so profound in both Iowa and New Hampshire. They are not going to endorse.
You're going to see Obama endorse Sanders?
No, not endorse. Not endorse a non-Sanders candidate. Pressures me.
Let's bring you in as the concluding comment here. I mean, do you see Biden having any viability, or do you think actually, if it's not Bloomberg, who the president does seem slightly scared of at the moment, or the most scared of out of the Democratic field, Klobuchar might be the most obvious sort of consensus candidate for the moderates?
She might possibly, but the thing is that, well, I like Amy. People like Amy when they get to know her, but she has not gotten the momentum going. And Bloomberg has got nothing but momentum ahead because he's on the rise and he's got a lot more room to grow. And there's so much he has in common with Donald Trump. It's no wonder. It's like what Freud called it, the narcissism of small differences. All
right.
Yeah, we can go on, but you can just read my column.
I know. Well, that's a good note. That's a good note to finish on. Okay, I think Klobuchar is one to watch. Anyway, issue 2, coronavirus chaos.
Chinese state media might be proclaiming a glorious people's war against the coronavirus. But what's the real story? Well, the World Health Organization this week reported that the virus is not markedly developing in severity. But while Chinese authorities are expanding their diagnostic criteria and thus seeing increased victim numbers, it's hard to know the true situation on the ground. China, after all, is an authoritarian state with no independent media reporting. Outside China, there have been at least 2 deaths and 447 cases in 24 different nations. A cruise ship off the Japanese coast has also reported dozens of infections and has been quarantined. Still, some US officials are saying that the time has come for greater investment in biodefense capabilities. Writing this week, Joe Lieberman and Tom Ridge called for investment in, quote, the development of broad-spectrum vaccines, antivirals, and antimicrobials that can treat entire classes of pathogens, perhaps imperfectly at first, but buying time for the research apparatus to produce what we need, end quote.
Eleanor, one of the interesting things we sort of found out about this today is the Chinese have been lying about the degree to which their medical staff have been suffering really catastrophic losses. It's like Chernobyl sort of rescue workers. How much do you think we can look at China now and say they've got this under control?
Oh, I don't look at them at all as though they've got this under control. First of all, they have fired people who have tried to get the word out. They arrested the original doctor.
Who died.
Yeah, who died. And they've got 60 million people under lockdown. And the potential of this virus, nobody's quite sure if it can spread when people aren't showing symptoms. And it's kind of certain how lethal it is. And then the rumors going around that it originated from a Chinese lab, which is why when you just put up this business about Lieberman and Ridge wanting these pathogens, wanting these viruses to be developed, there's sort of a hint there that there's a suspicion that this maybe somehow accidentally got out of a lab somewhere. Right. And so we really are dealing in sort of 21st century public health terrorizing facts. And the fact that we are almost immune in this country with very few cases, and the president is saying, oh, once it gets warm, it's going to go away. It's possible the coronaviruses do sort of fade generally, but there's a fear that this is a combination with a SARS virus and it could have staying power. We're in very dangerous territory here.
I think the people in really dangerous territory are the Chinese. I mean, the Communist Party and Xi Jinping handled this traditionally. Lie, deny, blame it on the Americans, and the things spread. I mean, it does. The good news is that take the United States, I think we've had 14 or 16 cases. I don't think there's any deaths in the U.S. yet. Very few deaths abroad outside of China. But this is a real problem for the Chinese Communist Party because of its monopoly of power, all wisdom. It knows everything and does everything. Nobody else can be blamed for it. And with that, along with the Hong Kong uprising, I think, is a real problem for Xi Jinping, who was out of pocket for a full week when this thing broke.
Right.
Yeah, but you said they're blaming the Americans. I missed that.
Their propaganda is trying to make it. This is a war of Chinese nationalism against the West, who wants us to fail, and
the Americans are exploiting this.
That's why you see a double-edged effect of totalitarianism, if you will. If they say we're going to build a hospital for 3,000 people in 6 days, they can do it.
Right.
And you're just dazzled by how efficient they are. However, when it comes to spreading information, which is really reliable information, that's where they're falling down because they're accustomed to keeping everything secret rather than letting out the word, and that just contributes to the panic and false rumors, et cetera.
They've been working on the reporting numbers if you go to a hospital versus if you have the virus. Right. But the virus they're saying you have to stay 6 feet away from someone who has the virus. So it's spread to some countries, but wait until it spreads, if it does spread to Africa or India, it's going to be rampant in those countries where it's highly condensed populations in very small countries with absolutely no medical equipment and no Chinese authoritarian government to sit there and put hospitals.
Good point.
It has potential to go much
The
worse.
thing in China is that the people do not trust the government. They believe the government is lying. I mean, it feels a little bit like what's happening here. And once you lose
not
trust,
quite as bad. Not quite as bad here.
No, but I think trust in government here is pretty low. And
but it has been for a long time.
The phenomenon is not helpful when you're faced with a crisis like this.
Pat, sorry, actually, I'll go to Clarence, because I never go to Clarence enough.
Well, thank you. I certainly agree with that.
I apologize, sir.
No, I just want to interject there. The Chinese have a lot of workers over in Africa, but they do keep them confined and isolated from the rest of the population.
Not the workers,
for the most
though.
part.
And it doesn't take that much to spread the diseases, though.
Very large. You go to Mozambique or South Africa, Botswana, you will see very large compounds where they are kept. However, they can go out and shop. And
they also can go to Lagos and other international airports.
So Ryan, the broader point here is whether, and as I understand it, that there isn't forensic evidence that this was a bioweapon, but it's an open question.
It came from an Indian scientist said it was, but India and China, I mean, misinformation.
It's not the market thing. But
there,
let me ask you another question. On that point of Tom Ridge and Joe Lieberman, right? When you have a lot of ex-government officials writing, we need an EMP shield and all this stuff because they want money for it. Do you think we should be spending significantly more money on antivirals that are perhaps not actually going to have any value when the next outbreak comes
Well, the
along?
CDC has started to do some operational things with buying large stockpiles of it. But even the masks, I think they need 25 billion masks to prevent if this outbreak happens in America. And I think right now they have a stockpile of 5 billion. And most of those masks are made in China, just simply because liberalism. Thank God we have massive, cheap products from Walmart. That's problematic, and that's problematic because we didn't invest in American manufacturing, which is another story.
Cheap products at Walmart, though, save American families money. But that's a trade.
But they destroy their jobs.
That's another issue. Quickly,
but I think politically, what you need to look at, especially when it comes to America, is the fact that the Chinese economy is tanking right now. Right. And does that affect America, especially going to an election year with the Chinese economy going?
We haven't really gotten
Eleanor,
into,
I'll let you conclude.
We haven't really gotten into the economic fallout from all of this, and China is definitely hurting. But if they're our biggest creditor, so we're not immune to what's happening over there. And the president is already saying if there's a slowdown, blame the coronavirus, not him.
We will see what happens. Let's move on. Issue 3, Trump's economy.
This was just given to me by one of the folks. So in the United States, the market is setting a record. We set another record today.
President Trump talks about the economy a lot, but who can blame him? After all, economic growth and the markets are running very strong. At 3.6%, the unemployment rate stands at near 50-year lows. Young people and minorities are also benefiting, with the black unemployment rate now at 6%, down from 7.5% at the start of Trump's term. And while Democrats suggest this success is down to President Obama, most economists say that sustained employment growth is far harder when, as now, the economy is running strong with reduced labor slack.
Clarence, who gets the credit? Mr. Obama or Mr. Trump? Or a bit of both?
Well, whoever's in power gets the credit because they also get the blame when things go wrong.
Who deserves the credit then?
Yeah, well, it is true that this recovery started under Obama, and President Trump has failed to cause it to crash. Despite his policies of trying to impose various trade tariffs and various other moves.
Wait, let Clarence finish. Yeah.
Which would be, and also raising the budget deficits, et cetera. He's counting on keeping this churning right through Election Day. What happens after that, I have no idea. Pat.
But look, it was good. They said when Trump was elected, there goes the market, it's going to crash. The market, he certainly, with the tax cuts, deregulation, is responsible for the booming markets across the board. He's responsible for the lowest unemployment rate that we've had, African Americans, women, and others. It's been going down. There's no doubt he inherited economy growing at 2%, but he's continued it on to the point where it is in tremendous shape as of right now. As of November, I'm a little bit more nervous.
We share that, Pat.
He's also responsible for Amazon and big corporations not paying any taxes. He gave away a huge tax giveaway that went to the corporations. And what did they do? They bought back stock. They didn't really invest in their people. I give credit to Obama and Ben Bernanke for getting us out of that terrible recession. Ben Bernanke was the head of the chairman of the Federal Reserve. He was a student of the Great Depression. He was a Keynesian, and it was his policies that his policies that brought us out. We were losing 800,000 jobs a month.
But it was the slowest recovery on record.
And it's a very slow build-up now.
Fair point.
Trump's comments about 3, 4, 5, 6%, it's not going to happen. A slow recovery turns out to be pretty damn good.
But Eleanor, you just criticized Trump for the Amazon thing. I mean, Brent Bernanke and Obama created the American oligarchs. I mean, Bloomberg's wealth went from $4 billion to $25 billion under the Obama presidency. It was. He bailed out the banks. He gave it to the rich guys, and American main streets didn't really do so well.
Hey, what's I guess oligarchs?
I think
you're a Republican, man.
Not that kind of Republican. And then, and I think the most important thing, though, with the Trump presidency is that wages are growing at 3%, and that is very, very important. Now, it would be better if we had tighter labor markets and we would crack down on the H-1, H-2B visas for the working and middle class. But they are
That might
going at
cause
3%.
economic issues, though, wouldn't
No,
it?
it wouldn't. It would increase wages. There is enough of a labor. There's still enough Americans out of work who are looking for work to fill jobs that aren't doing
Labor
it right now.
participation rate is
And
still.
look, who was it that was the first president to take a hard look at NAFTA that now everybody says was a rotten deal? Very few said that in the 90s. Who was it was the first guy that took on China and their trade policies against the United States?
I think that was
None of
Pat
these-
Buchanan.
I was going to say, it's true.
Okay. But Trump comes in second here, Eleanor.
Somebody listen to you. See?
Right.
But one of the interesting things we see with the president, right? In the China, we have a phase 1 trade deal at the moment. Perhaps phase 2 is going to be more complicated because of intellectual property. The Chinese like stealing the best things we create. But on that, broader issue of Trump's approach to trade, Eleanor, we do see with the replacement of NAFTA, the USMCA, it's actually effectively quite similar to NAFTA, isn't
It's
it?
very similar to NAFTA, but the Democrats did get some improvements in environmental and unions, and the unions actually endorsed it. So, yeah, I commend that new trade deal, but it was not like it was this big departure from NAFTA at all. I mean,
Well, they needed to.
the
There's
president,
no
some
question
dairy
about it.
issues.
The United States is still, just as I mentioned, when you had these supply chains are all blocked up now because of China, our manufacturing is not as booming as it should be. Our self-reliance is never going to be what it was. But at least Trump is moving in the direction. He stood up. He did the best he could. He fought it as hard as he could with the Chinese. And hopefully we'll have a second
Right.
deal
Part of
in
the
the
reason our
second term.
manufacturing is not booming is because our infrastructure is terrible, and and a broad infrastructure bill just needs to happen to sit there. To revive the Midwest, it has to come from infrastructure and from cracking down international technology.
The manufacturing plants are not back in those Midwestern states.
Yeah, they're back in California. They're in
not in
California
the
and
Midwestern
Nevada.
states. The two
Yeah.
coasts are doing fine, but not those states that gave this president.
But the states
his
that
tour.
All right, let me ask Clarence a question. Well, you make your point. and
I
ask.
was going to say, is the infrastructure weak again? Is it? I mean,
no, but it should be. Yeah.
No, it should be. And President Trump again brought it up in his State of the Union address, as he should. But I'm waiting to see a deal. With the other problem we haven't really dealt with much here is the kind of divide that we've got in Washington, trying to get even a routine deal that obviously benefits both sides, and we do need it. And I'm waiting to see. We seem to be moving farther apart.
Yeah, the reason why infrastructure went to Nevada, Texas, and California is because the infrastructure. It's not going to the Midwest because we just haven't had this massive infrastructure replacement since the 50s. There's no high-speed rail. There's nothing there.
My point was Trump made promises he can't deliver on, like
Well, he
bringing
kept a lot
back the
of them.
coal industry is another one.
Pat, there seems to be relative consensus on the idea of infrastructure at some point. But one of the things people, I think, don't necessarily talk enough about is why is it when we appropriate vast sums of money, it takes the shovel-ready projects are never shovel-ready and always run over budget? Why
Well, I
can't we
think
make it more efficient?
I think there's a number of reasons for that. Some of them union contracts, but you're exactly right.
Environmental
It takes
issues.
years, and look at what Ike did when he started the interstate highway system in '56. I can remember I was in St. Louis in the early '50s, and they're building the first road to Kansas City. All of those things we did. I don't know why Americans, in terms of efficiency, I don't know that we are as efficient as we used to be. I don't know that we got the incentives we did. We certainly don't build the things we did. If only they could fix the access road to the GW Parkway.
You and the CIA will be happy with that. Eleanor, any comments on that?
Yeah.
Regulations, yes, but these are good regulations. Environment, people's neighborhoods. You have the president wanting to build his wall that's going to trample through neighborhoods. He's getting a lot of resistance. So
But maybe if we could just take
we
some-
have an autocrat in the White House. He would like to just wave his wand and do away with, and he has done away with a lot of
Maybe if we
Your
regulations.
concluding comment.
Maybe if we just took some of those $2 trillion we've been spending in Afghanistan for 20 years almost and redirected to our own infrastructure, we'd have
Don't talk to me about that. Talk to the White House.
Thank you. Predictions,
I think Bernie will win Nevada, and I think Bernie will win South Carolina.
Eleanor.
Judge Amy Berman next week will have something to say about the Roger Stone sentencing and about the absolutely autocratic performance of this president in interfering in a criminal case.
The Russian assault in northern Syria against rebel groups will cause another refugee crisis into Europe coming this spring and summer.
I've been warning about this, Patrick.
They're
The
gonna-
Russians, you've got to
refugees
keep
are-
them.
The refugees
Well,
are going to
refugees will
come.
go
Greece
into
just
Turkey.
built a 1.5-mile seawall to stop refugees from
They're
going
going to go
Greece.
into Turkey first. and then the Turks are going to let them go into Europe.
Might see some Turkey-Russia conflagration coming.
Conflagration or conflagration?
I think that's a British thing. Maybe let's hope it's a British mistake.
I don't know.
I think Biden is going to eke it out in South Carolina. He's going to win, but it's going to be so much lower than what had been expected early on. That's going to raise serious questions that could lead to the collapse of his campaign.
Staying alive is what this primary is going to be all about for some weeks.
Eleanor, what do you think, in terms of your prediction, what are you predicting with Roger Stone's sentence? I think around 4 or 5 years.
I'm thinking the 7 to 9 is high, and that she won't go for that, but she will let it be known that she doesn't like to be bullied any more than the Attorney General, who very remarkably said, I don't like to be bullied.
Even he has his limits.
Even he has his limits, that's right.
I predict that visiting India later this month, President Trump will be meted by truly vast crowds. Mr. President will love it. The Secret Service will not. I also want to say, in lieu of that, that Clarence Page's column, if you Google Clarence Page 1776, it's a very beautiful column, Mr. Page. So you should read that.
Anyway, Thomas Jefferson.
Thank you for watching. Remember, the discussion continues at McLaughlin.com, and check out our podcast wherever you listen to audio-related matters.